Hi, I'm Jocelyn from the ketoathlete.org. I'm here today to talk to you about some of the keto things that I've tried, what I liked and what I didn't. So a little bit about me first. Who am I? My name's Jocelyn. I'm 36 years old. I'm married. I have 2 kids. I've been following a cyclic ketogenic diet since January of 2017, and I've been doing CrossFit since 2008. I've been documenting what that's like to train in a high intensity sport on a ultra low carb diet on an Instagram account, The Keto Athlete, and now gathering information and recipes and all kinds of great stuff on a website, theketoathlete.org. So one of the first things I tried was MCT oil in the form of a bulletproof coffee. This was my gateway to keto back in January of 2017. I was looking for more energy for morning workouts, but not wanting to eat a big meal before I worked out. And I'd read lots of people raving about the stable energy and mental clarity provided by this bulletproof coffee thing. So I gave it a try. I love it. I haven't missed a day in almost 3 years of my bulletproof coffee in the morning. I take 2 tablespoons of C8 MCT oil every day. So MCT oil gets a big thumbs up from me. One of the next things I tried as I was ditching all of the bread and wraps and carb stuff out of my diet was low carb alternatives. This is just one example, but there were several. This is a low carb cinnamon raisin bread. You can see from the nutrition facts here that it's only 1 gram of net carbs per slice. So I thought, awesome. For a while, I was eating 2 slices of it with a little maple butter every day with my breakfast, and no doubt it's delicious. But I was finding it was really, my guts were feeling upset and bloated and really gross. So I started to look at the ingredients, and after water, the first ingredient on here is soy flour and then wheat gluten. Both of those things are not good. Soy flour messes with your hormones and your estrogen levels and all kinds of things that are not good for athletes and athletic recovery. And then the next ingredient is wheat gluten. So gluten is the protein found in wheat, which is why you'll see a fairly high amount of protein on the nutrition facts per slice of bread. And you would think, oh, great, this bread has lots of protein. But it's in the form of gluten, which is not great for the human body. Some people are more or less sensitive to it, but nobody needs it and nobody thrives with it. If you watched my genetics video previously, you'll know I carry the genetic predisposition for celiac disease. I don't have celiac, but I'm predisposed to that as well as Crohn's disease. So that might be why it generally wasn't making my guts feel very good. Now, this wheat gluten stuff, the way they make it is they take a lump of bread dough and they wash it, and they wash it, and they wash it, and they wash it until all the starch is washed away. And what they're left with is this gluey, gelatinous gray sort of lump called vital wheat gluten, or just wheat gluten. Now, you'll often see that in vegetarian or vegan circles as something called seitan, S-E-I-T-A-N. You can kind of shape it into a little loaf, and they'll cook it and slice it as a meat replacement. But it's basically a highly concentrated source of gluten, which is not a good idea. So low carb bread and all the bread products, had to ditch those. Thumbs down. The next thing when you start looking on Pinterest for all kinds of keto recipes is you'll find everything has high amounts of cheese. So if you love cheese, the keto diet is for you. Cheese, heavy cream, cream cheese, cheese as snacks, all kinds of stuff. So I tried making a few different things. I experimented with some recipes like the fathead pizza dough recipe, which is great. My husband and my kids loved it. It's tasty for sure, but dairy just doesn't sit well with me. And again, in my previous video on my 23andMe genetic data, I don't carry the gene for adult lactase persistence, which means I don't produce the enzyme lactase that's necessary to break down lactose, which is the sugar in milk. I find too much dairy makes my skin break out. It makes my asthma worse. Doesn't sit very well in my gut. So unfortunately, all these very heavy, cheesy recipes, they also had to go. Thumbs down for that stuff. Next up was all the fake sweeteners. So again, you start Googling keto recipes, you're going to come across all kinds of substitutions to take sugar out of your diet. So some of the chemical ones like aspartame, more natural sources of non-caloric sweeteners like stevia, some of the sugar alcohols like xylitol, maltitol, even plant-based ones like monk fruit sweetener. I just found that having those sweet, hyper-palatable foods in my diet on a regular basis just left me craving more sweet foods. It left me too hungry. It just left me wanting more. It didn't leave me with any kind of satiety that made me feel full and satisfied. I find I would rather just abstain from sweet foods most of the time and then just enjoy the real thing once in a while. So I would rather just have a real dessert once a week than to try to incorporate fake versions of things on a daily basis. So all the fake sweeteners, the keto desserts, the fat bombs, all that kind of stuff had to go. Exogenous ketones. So we live in a weird world now where to say that you are ketogenic is not necessarily the same thing as being in ketosis. Ketogenic means you are either restricting total calories or just restricting carbohydrates to the point that your body starts breaking down fat, your liver produces ketone bodies, acetoacetate and beta-hydroxybutyrate. Now we've developed supplemental ketone esters and ketone salts so you can ingest them, exogenous, meaning outside your body, and elevate your levels, your blood levels of ketones that would reflect you being in ketosis, even though your liver, your body was not producing any of those ketones. So I tried most of the exogenous ketones, most of the different brands, even the pyramid scheme one, even though I'm morally and philosophically opposed to MLM companies. Even tried that one. It's not good. So I tried most of them. This one is my favorite, the Keto ND or Ketone. I'm actually not even sure how you say it. They offered to sponsor me to say that I like this one, and I said no thank you. I would actually rather just be able to say that I like it and pay for my own supplements. I do use exogenous ketones before I work out, almost every time I work out. I like to pair this one with their strength and endurance formula, which contains a bit more creatine, beta-alanine, and branched-chain amino acids. Now, all these ketone salts taste terrible. They taste awful. This is the least terrible tasting of all of them, but it's because they're very salty. But I think the saltiness is actually probably what provides most of the benefit besides just the exogenous beta-hydroxybutyrate itself. If we look at the nutrition facts for these exogenous ketones, we see a high amount of sodium, but also some of the other electrolyte minerals, calcium, magnesium, that kind of stuff that's important. If you are interested in this topic of why sodium is extra important and why it's a health benefit and a performance enhancer, I highly recommend you read Dr. James's book, The Salt Fix, probably the most comprehensive, well-researched book on the history of nutrition research regarding salt, how it became to be known as a bit of an enemy, why that was totally undeserved, and why most of us need to be incorporating much more salt into our diet. So I like the exogenous ketones, thumbs up. A little bit for the ketones, but probably mostly for the high sodium content. Now, the next thing was almonds and leafy greens. And you go, why are those two things together? It's because those are both, I have discovered, high oxalate foods. Now, what the heck is an oxalate? They're little compounds, little crystally compounds found in plant foods as a defense mechanism. Now, plants don't want to be eaten, but they didn't develop physical warfare like speed and claws and teeth and, body armor. They developed chemical warfare. One of them is an oxalate. So your body will try to get rid of these oxalate crystals. They're basically toxic by binding them with different minerals. When people develop kidney stones, those are mostly calcium oxalate. So your body's trying to bind it to the calcium to excrete it. If you have way too much, they build those crystals get too big and you can't pass them anymore. You get very, very, very painful kidney stones. But these oxalate crystals can also be accumulated or sort of shoved away in other places in your body, your connective tissue, your joints, even your skin. So I found, oddly enough, when I gave up eating so many almonds, and a lot of keto recipes are heavy on the almond butter, almond flour, snacking on almonds, bars containing lots of almonds, because they're high fat and relatively low carb. But I found when I switched to replace my almonds with macadamia nuts, which are much lower in oxalates, and I gave up eating leafy greens as well, like spinach, also very high in oxalates, I found my skin cleared up. I'd had lingering acne that just wouldn't go away even after a couple of years of keto, and chronic back pain that I've had for close to 9 years since I had my first baby. Both of those things cleared up, which was amazing to me. So I found when I got rid of these oxalate foods, things got way better. So oxalates, thumbs down, no more green veggies, no more almonds, and I feel way better. Fatty meats. I did a challenge for myself about a year ago. I called it Red October, where I made all of my protein sources red meat and eggs. I was still eating some nuts and some vegetables, so not 100% carnivore, but I gave up eating fish and chicken and lower quality sources of protein at the time, replaced everything with red meat. Red meat contains, it's one of the most bioavailable, nutrient-dense sources of heme iron, creatine, choline, B12, all of the amazing things that an athlete needs to recover, grow your muscles, and feel great. I enjoy eating red meat. It was tasty. It was enjoyable to do. I also found, as a totally unanticipated side effect, was that I started getting way more REM sleep. Now, using my Whoop strap, and then I later upgraded to the Oura Ring, I get an adequate total amount of sleep. I'm pretty good with 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, but I was always getting a very low amount of REM sleep. And it turns out, also if you've watched my genetics video, that I'm not very good at processing choline. So I need a higher amount than probably most people. The best sources of choline, egg yolks, and red meat. So when I was finally getting an adequate amount of choline, which is an important precursor to acetylcholine that helps you initiate REM sleep in your brain, I was finally able to get enough of that important REM sleep. REM sleep is where your brain does all your processing of learning and memory, emotional management, all kinds of things that make you wake up feeling more refreshed, more alert, more mentally focused. So eating lots of fatty meat, red meat, gets a big thumbs up. That was one of my favorite modifications to my diet. Time-restricted eating. So you can push yourself to being ketogenic, making your own body produce beta-hydroxybutyrate through one of two things. Either just not eating at all or totally restricting your carbohydrates. So as a natural consequence of not taking in so many carbohydrates, becoming much more fueled by fat, I found my hunger and satiety was much more stable. I wasn't as hungry as often, so I just wasn't feeling the need to eat as often. So I naturally have gravitated to a much smaller eating window. So it's become fashionable to call it time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting or whatever, but I basically just don't eat so many hours of the day now. There's a good 12 to 14 hours where I'm water only from evening till mid-morning or even noon the next day. Then the first thing I have is that bulletproof coffee, butter, and MCT oil, so just fat for another 3 to 4 hours. And then I have one, sometimes usually 2 big meals, one mid-afternoon of fatty kind of breakfast foods, eggs and meat, maybe some macadamia nuts, and then an evening dinner meal of red meat. So I found that time-restricted eating was an awesome time for my guts to rest. I also found when I started incorporating more fasting, some strange side effects like some built up spots of keloid scar tissue on my body started to break down and disappear, which is a sign of that autophagy being triggered. Autophagy is your body's cellular cleanup process that can only happen during times of fasting when your body's not directing all that energy towards digestion and eating all the time. So I found some inadvertent benefits to just not shoving food in my face every minute of the day. It's also really time efficient. Like I came from that old world of bodybuilding where, oh my God, you have to eat every 2 hours and eat 6 times a day. Like who has frickin' time for that? Who has time for that? I don't have time for that. So it was very freeing, just not being chained to needing to eat every 2 hours or turning into a hangry monster like I wouldn't be able to handle myself. So that super stable energy, super stable blood sugar, super stable hunger and satiety all day long was just very freeing to me. So I really enjoy the time-restricted eating. It's something that just kind of happened naturally on its own. So love that time-restricted eating. So what stayed? What did I like? MCT oil, fat, the exogenous ketones for their sodium content, the fatty meat for all the highly dense, highly bioavailable sources of nutrition, and the time-restricted eating for all of its gut rest and body healing and repair mechanisms. What had to go? All the low-carb bread products with their high gluten content, the cheesy everything with the lactose that I don't digest very well, all the keto desserts with their fake sweetener and their hyper-palatable combinations of sweet and fat together, all the green veggies and almonds and the plant-based stuff that was providing way too many oxalates and making my joints hurt and my skin break out. So really, if we look at that list of what got to stay and what had to go, what stayed was human food. Through a process like years of experimentation, what was left is the natural, species-appropriate, sapient human diet of fatty meats, eggs, salt, a little bit of nutrient-dense things like some nuts in there once in a while, but majority animal foods. And that's how I thrive and feel the best. Thanks for watching.